Hello and welcome to the Winner Winner podcast by Welcome, where we speak with the Democratic Party candidates who prove they can win the middle, beat Republicans on Trump turf, and recalibrate the party to the median voter. Here at Welcome, we work to strengthen a centrist faction that wins and governs responsibly. We support centrist Democrats running in Trump districts through Welcome Pack. Today, I'm super excited to be in conversation with my friend Shannon Bird, who's running for Congress in Colorado's 8th Congressional District against Republican Gabe Evans. Shannon served in the Colorado State House for 7 years and has been a pragmatic voice and leader for Democrats in the state. As a results-oriented legislator with an independent streak, Shannon has built a record of challenging the status quo to deliver tangible outcomes for her constituents. In the state legislature, Shannon focused on issues that resonate across party lines, protecting Colorado jobs, improving public safety, and expanding economic opportunity. She has consistently shown a willingness to take politically difficult votes when they align with the needs of her district, reinforcing her credibility with moderate and unaffiliated voters. Colorado's 8th Congressional District is the near definition of a swing seat and is likely to play a decisive role in determining the control of the U.S. House in 2026. Located just north of Denver, the district includes many of the region's northern suburbs. Colorado 8 has a Cook PVI of even and is currently rated as a toss-up, and Trump won the district by 2 points in 2024. The district is on the DCCC's Districts and Playlist, a possible precursor to Red to Blue. Shannon, welcome to the Winner Winner podcast, and so nice to chat with you today.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. We always enjoy getting to speak with you. So for folks who don't know as much about you and your background, you've been very open about sharing about your upbringing and your background and what led you into leadership and service and politics. Do you mind sharing with us about, your life?
Oh, I'm happy to. So I was raised by my single mom and my grandma. I grew up in a trailer park, and my grandmother was a dealer in the Nevada casinos. We made our ends meet because she shared her tip money with us. And I'll tell you, with that kind of upbringing with two strong women, you learn how to fight hard, you fight for what's right, and give back to your community. And I'll tell you, it was also in those early days that I saw what makes a community work. Good public schools. I always loved my teachers because they could see the good in me the same as they could see the good in the doctor's daughter. They gave us both attention, high quality education, and created real opportunities for all of us. That's a long way of saying that I am the first in my family to go to college. And this is really a pride of my family. It was something that my family, along with so many other families, they work so hard to make sure that their kids have opportunities that they didn't have growing up. So that's something that I've never taken for granted. I worked very hard and was in school for a while, worked my way through college, graduate school, and then ultimately law school, and had a career as a public and corporate finance attorney for a while. And big career, worked at least 70, 80 hours a week regularly. And I'll tell you, when you're working that hard, there isn't that much opportunity to pay that much attention to your community. When my husband and I got married, we had kids, and I made the decision to stay home with them at least until they went to school. And that is actually how I got into public service. It's sort of on accident. When they went to school, I started volunteering in their classrooms. And like so many people, a lot of moms out there, a lot of dads too, you get into classrooms and you start seeing that there are some things that need to get done. And it turns out it's in my nature that I like to fix things. So I went from being the classroom parent volunteer to then being asked to be the PTO president. And then I was asked to chair the school district's education foundation, and then to lead the school district's bond campaign so we could start paying our teachers, fixing broken school buildings, all of the things that I knew needed to be fixed in our district. After that, someone said, you worked really hard on that bond campaign. Have you ever thought of running for city council? And no, I had never thought of running for city council or any office, but I did, raised my hand again and found that there were a whole host of local problems that needed to be addressed and just needed people who were of good faith, willing to roll up their sleeves, dive into the problems, and try to build coalitions to get things done. And while I was there, we created a first of its kind apprenticeship program for high school students to learn how to become diesel mechanics through an intern program in our Parks and Utilities department. One of our firefighters created a whole curriculum for a fire science program, again, to bring high school kids in and create a pipeline of talent. Affordable housing was something also that we began during my term of service. And by the time I left, our city had about 900 new affordable homes in the pipeline to be constructed for struggling families in my city. After that, I had the opportunity to run for the state legislature, and there I have served for the last 7 years, working really hard to fund our public schools. In fact, I carried the legislation and, as chair of our state's budget committee, wrote the budget to finally fully fund Colorado's public schools for the first time in 15 years. So that's kind of the background and how I got into public service. And I will tell you, aside from being a mother to my kids, a spouse to my husband, having earned the people's trust for the last 10 years has been one of the greatest honors of my life.
That is wonderful and a beautiful story as well, because I used to serve on this organization's board here in South Carolina called South Carolina Women in Leadership. And it was basically trying to encourage more women to run for office, whether it's elected or appointed office, because they're saying like many women don't realize they're already leaders. Like you mentioned, they're serving in their communities, they're serving in their children's schools. And sometimes people don't understand that it's an incredibly transferable skill going from the public schools that your kids are at to the state legislature. So let's talk about your time in the ledge, if that's cool. You've been a force, to be quite honest, and it is incredibly admirable and inspiring to see. And you have resigned, so you're not in the ledge anymore, which is good for some donors who like to give to people who aren't currently in the ledge. Hat tip on that. But when you think about your time in the legislature, especially in a state like Colorado, I talk to Coloradans and they've emphasized like we need to encourage people to understand like Colorado is a blue state, but it's not like totally as blue as people think it is, right? We still have some purple tinge to us, and people don't understand that if we take things too far in Colorado, we'll go back to being a red state, right? So do you want to talk about your time in the legislature, some votes and some decisions that you've made that you feel like helped earn not only your trust among your voters, but also help frame the Democratic Party in your state to be actually trustworthy and on the side of voters in the state?
Yes. So, one thing that I have loved about being a state representative is I get to be on the ballot every other year. And that's the same as hopefully I will be a member of Congress and I will get to be on the ballot every other year. And a lot of people talk about that being a real burden. For me, I think that proximity and that accountability to your voters on such a frequent basis is what makes our power and our style of leadership in the House that much more important and that much more in touch with what's going on and what people are hoping to see from their government. Just to preface my answer to your question, I think a little bit of background would be helpful. So I first ran for the state ledge in 2018, which was Trump's first midterm election. And during that time, as I was out knocking on doors, it was clear to me that voters were disgusted by what they were seeing with the Trump administration. They wanted something better. And what they wanted was an adult in the room. They wanted someone to come in and provide responsible governance, and to see the polarization and the extreme style of governance, if you could even call it that we were seeing from the Trump administration then, as we're seeing now, was just abhorrent to so many people whose doors I knocked on. And to be clear, the doors I was knocking on were moderate Republicans and independents. That's my persuadable universe to go out and talk to people, not hardcore Democrats. So that was the lens that I began my legislative service with, and a true commitment to go and do the work, because it's a true opportunity in circumstances that Trump had created for us in 2018 to go demonstrate that we are the adults in the room and we're going to show you what responsible governance looks like. So, to that point, I have spent my time making sure that I am listening to my constituents, hosting frequent in-person town halls during my 7 years in the legislature, something that is in addition to the door knocking every other year. I've hosted over 90 in-person town halls and community
Wow.
days to make sure I'm just telling people how the place works. What is it like to be in the state capitol and to start talking about legislation? And the longer I was there, it became more clear that there were some bills I needed to talk about, not just the successes, but some bills that I was running that weren't being passed. And leads me to some of the votes and some of the leadership that I have brought to the state capitol that might not be in line with Well, it might be more in line with the center.
There you go. We love winning the middle.
Winning the middle. Yes. So something that was really clear to me through conversations with constituents is people would like to be safe in their homes and they'd like to be safe on the streets. Actually, we would just like to be safe everywhere. And that's not really the direction of the majority. I'm not saying that people were trying to make things less safe, but there has been an intense push for criminal justice reform in ways that began to seem to be out of step with my everyday voters' understanding of what it was going to take to keep them safe. So I ran legislation to hold people appropriately accountable for indecent exposure in front of a minor. And I held off a filibuster, a 4.5 hour filibuster that was conducted by my own party against that bill. It wasn't everyone in my caucus. There were a very vocal few, and still wound up passing my bill at the end of the day and wound up really having to fight to defend that bill and make sure that it eventually became the law of the land. There was another piece of legislation earlier on that would have made it much more difficult to hold people accountable for a host of misdemeanors and even some felonies. I took a vote to end that piece of legislation in committee. That vote wound up making national news, but it is one of those votes that I know has aged well in a time when people are increasingly concerned about public safety and some of the direction that there are some people in the country where they would like to take the criminal justice system. So that's meant a lot to me. Automobile theft is something that has plagued my district and our state. I also ran legislation in partnership with our state's district attorneys and police chiefs to change the penalties around that. So again, that was meaningful. And now we have seen about a 40% decrease in automobile theft in our state as a result of that legislation. So I feel very good about that. That's probably one key place. And I'll just tell you what has been really meaningful and important is being in conversation with my constituents as I'm doing this work, so they always know the trade-offs and they hear what I'm hearing. I'd like to give you one other example of something that's a little bit different in terms of my style of leadership. So since I've been at the Capitol, there has been a big push for environmental regulation, which is important. We all want clean air, clean water, and to be good stewards of our environment. And at the same time, I know from my time knocking on doors, we need it to be affordable and for people's energy to be sustainable. So lots of trade-offs come with new regulations, new protections. Protections are great. Regulations and how we get there to be good stewards really matters. And to do it in a thoughtful way that doesn't increase people's energy bills. So one of my best attended town halls was one that I convened so that my constituents could hear what I was hearing at the Capitol and understand that the issue of protecting the environment and your utility bill, it's not black and white. So at this particular session, I invited somebody from the oil and gas industry. I invited somebody from the renewable industry, somebody who specialized in solar energy, and then someone who ran our the utility. So we had all three perspectives, and people were taking notes, asking questions. I had somebody ask if my speakers would be willing to come and speak to their neighborhood groups because it was one of the most fascinating discussions. They had no idea the nuance and how tricky these issues are. And I think that building that relationship with the people you represent and being honest, it's worth a million.
Oh, 100%. And, you mentioned a couple things that I was really excited about. One was the severe reduction in crime. I think it was multiple bills that you'd worked on for public safety that did result in a reduction in crime, which is incredibly important because people think like, oh yeah, crime is going down in America. Like that doesn't just happen. Like some bills are passed and things change and people stop committing crimes because they don't want to go to jail. Or they go to jail and they stay in jail because they're not committing crimes when they're in jail. So yeah, I just love that you are, taking that seriously because obviously Democrats have, almost zero accountability or trust, I should say, among voters when it comes to public safety, whether it's, public safety or immigration. So thinking about too, another piece of legislation that I was really excited about, we worked on requiring Colorado to assess impacts on people's jobs when they were considering changes in regulations in the oil and gas industry. Do you want to talk about like that industry in particular? And again, like just the way that you wanted to approach how it impacts people's jobs? Because to your point, like people are like, oh, like, we have to save the planet, which we do, but we don't necessarily think about the immediate ramifications of people's jobs being eliminated and how that would result in people not only, having a means of income, but also rejecting the party that was in charge of doing that.
Yes. So I would want to give you one more story also in the lead up to this. So that was a critical bill. It wound up, long story short, not passing because there wasn't funds. The state didn't have the funding to implement some of the recommendations that were included in the bill. And I think, candidly, even if we did have the money, I don't know that my colleagues would have passed this because of the pushback from different advocacy groups that
Right.
didn't like this.
Yeah.
But again, door knocking. So back in, I think this was 2022, I was out knocking on doors and happened upon one house where the person on my list to talk to shooed me away. She said, "Oh, you're a Democrat. I'm going to vote for you. Don't worry about me." And so, great, that's awesome. And I'm ready to walk away. But then her husband was listening in and he was working in the garage and he comes out and he says, "Oh, I'm a voter. Can I talk to you?" And, "Absolutely. I would love to be your state representative. Let's talk. What do you care about?" And like, "Well, I feel like the Democratic Party has left me behind." "Oh, okay. Well, why do you feel that way?" And I proceeded to have about a 45-minute conversation with him.
Wow.
It turned out he was a member of one of our local unions, a union that had endorsed me. And his union is heavily dependent upon jobs in the oil and gas industry. And
Mm,
he talked about feeling as though at the Capitol, we were not, as Democrats, people running this legislation, we were not doing our work to bring people to the table and really talk about these impacts and feeling like, why weren't we recognizing the value of his perspective and his job? So the conversation went far more ranging than that. It was really eye-opening for me, but it was a great reminder of how, in service of doing something that we know is a good thing to do and the right thing to do, of course, again, clean air, clean water, all of those things are critically important. And people matter. People need their jobs. People need to feed their families. And
right.
the choices shouldn't be one at the expense of the other or a zero-sum game. So, fast forward to my time in the legislature, I worked with union leadership to come forward with a bill. And actually, this man's union, as a matter of fact, they were leading on this with me to make sure that as the state considered new air quality regulations, that one of the data points that those commissioners would consider would be impacts on people's jobs. And right at that time, well, and even now, since my bill didn't pass, that was not even part of the conversation. It remains still not part of the conversation. And it has to be, because
Yeah.
we know that when we make decisions, we're not deciding in silos or
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, in an isolated set of circumstances. We don't work in a vacuum is the word
Yes.
I'm looking for.
Yes.
But we impact systems and it's people's lives and it's not theory. It's real. What we pass, we need to be honest about and we need to have thought it through and be clear-eyed about trade-offs and the costs that come with some of the policy choices we make. And that was what that bill was about, to make sure that we could be clear-eyed about our decisions. And if I were remaining in the legislature, that would be legislation I would champion even again.
Which is remarkable and so intentional and so thoughtful because to your point, it's like, wait, are we not examining everything that this bill would entail? It's not just about the language of the bill, it's about like how will the bill impact, right? That's good policies when you understand the impacts of the policy. So I commend you for your leadership on that because it's incredibly admirable. You mentioned a word a few minutes ago that one of my favorite words ever, which is nuance, right? And not only just understanding the nuances of different policies, understanding the nuance of how things work, but I always ask, candidates, what is the value of nuance, particularly on the left? What is the value of nuance in democratic politics so that it helps us continue to regain or earn or sustain trust among voters?
Yeah. What I would say about that is, to me, nuance comes when people would like to present an idea for a new law and make it as black and white, but it's not. There are 100 shades of gray, lots of different decision points, and different types of impacts. And to make good policy, you have to be mindful of all of the competing interests that you're impacting and understand in that nuance that there are trade-offs. And when you're considering that, to remain in conversation with your constituents, which I think that's, I don't know that enough of us in elected office understand how important that is. The people we are tasked with representing, that we are bringing them along with us. And our job is not to tell people what their values are and the way it should be. We are there to be representation and make sure that it's responsible governance, responsible leadership, and that we're fighting for people's interests and doing it in a way that they can understand and that they can buy into. Because at the end of the day, all of us, we serve with the consent of the people who elected us. And we don't own these seats. We are there, and it's because people believed in us to fight for them and to represent what their interests actually are. So the nuance is making sure we always understand that and that we are bringing people along with us and leading and governing and making decisions in a way that people understand and can support.
Absolutely. And that brings to mind another word that, is really important these days, which is courage, right? And I've written on Welcome Stack about the courage gap, calling out Democrats essentially saying like, y'all are a bunch of scaredy cats a lot of the times. You don't have the courage to stand up to your own party to represent the interests of your constituents and your voters, which is exactly what you've talked about. Where do you get your sense of courage when it comes to having to make these hard votes and have these conversations with your peers and your colleagues that are challenging and cause you to be in sticky situations sometimes? Like, where do you find your sense of courage, and how do you encourage and model courage for other people who are also running for office on the left?
So modeling courage is to do it. That's it. It's taking the hard votes and it's sticking with my guns. And how I've gotten there, there's a lot of pressure, and it's not just in politics, in any work environment. When people would like to get a thing done, there's a need for buy-in. And one thing I will say is that when we're elected into office, we are vested with a vote. And that's a vote on behalf of the people who sent us there. It's not my vote, my own personal capacity, my own wishes, how I'd cast maybe even my own ballot. And it's something, a vote. There are a lot of things here that I want to say about this, but your voters vest you with agency and with power to weigh in and to either advance an idea forward if it's going to be good on their behalf, and to stop it if it's going to be bad for them. And that is something that I take personally. If I were to ever cast a vote that would make somebody less safe, and I'm thinking directly of a bill I did vote on and one that I voted to stop, I can't imagine that if, say, for example, somebody were to call the police because they knew their daughter was unsafe. Say you have an adult daughter in an apartment somewhere. They call you because they hear somebody's walking around on the outside, and they're scared, they want help. And instead of calling police, they call you, the parent, and you say, call the police. And what happens if you call the police and they say, oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about that. The law doesn't allow us to do anything. Call us when something happens. I just could never be responsible for something like that. Our votes mean something. And I think that's something that I wish people understood, that it's not theory, that what those votes that we take on the floor, on the dais, they mean something to people's lives. And it can be life and death. It can be business or career ending for some people. The votes are not without consequence. And I will just share that I recognize the power comes from the people. And if I couldn't live with myself to give that power away to somebody else trying to achieve their own objective, if it wasn't in the best interest of the people who trusted me to go and represent them and fight for them. I couldn't live with myself. And I often think to myself, what if I had my representative come and say to me, Shannon, I know you really cared about such and such thing, but this person in House District X over here really wanted this and wanted me to show up for them. And I didn't want to make them mad. So I'm sorry that, now your costs have gone up exponentially, but I didn't want to make them mad over in this other district. They would have my head on a platter, and rightfully so. So every time I put it to myself like that, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I vote my district.
Yeah. You've used that example a few times when we've talked, and it always comes back to mind. It's you can literally imagine your constituents' faces in your head when you're talking about things, right? And that is so powerful because you can remember who you're impacting with the things that you're working on. And one thing that I think that, scaling it to Congress, when you're elected, because we're super excited to get you elected, girlfriend, is, there are obviously whips and there's leadership and there's pressure, and I feel like, if I could be honest, I feel like there are so many, and we're just talking about being on the left right now. I think there's so many Democrats who have the same, aspirations as you have and have even leadership that you've modeled. And then they get to Congress and they're just weak sauce, right? Like, why do you think that happens? And how do we encourage more Democrats to keep prioritizing the needs of their voters over the party and this trend of the hour online and the things that are in the news right now that are obviously, of concern, but when it comes down to the ballot box in November's on election days, people are going to remember your leadership and not just that trend or whatever happened that day.
That's right. Well, I have a distinct advantage over a lot of people who are first elected to Congress. I come with 7 years of elected experience under my belt where I've already been doing this. I have already suffered the wrath of my colleagues multiple times. And so it's not a new thing for me. And, once you do that, people understand that you are an independent thinker, and they might not like it, but it's not terrible every single time you do it. I would say I come into this job with agency. I understand what my role is, and I know the power that I have. And I think a lot of new people to elected office don't understand the power that they have. Something else that I want to point out about the seat that I'm running for, and this is purple seat, just as you said as in the introduction. This seat, if people want my vote, they're going to have to work with me, and I'm going to fight for my people. There's a lot of power that comes from somebody who holds a swing seat, and over again. And that's the place where you have so much agency and so much power to work for your people and make sure that we're passing bills that serve their best interests, that are fighting for them. So I already come into this knowing that, and I've already flexed that muscle, and I have strong muscle memory. So I'm looking forward to it, actually. And this is something that I think people are starving for. People have lost trust in their elected representatives, and so much of it is because people make promises and then don't live up to them. And that has to stop. We need more authenticity in our elected officials. We need the right people in the right districts, fighting for their people, being real, staying in conversation with them, bringing them along, showing up in their districts. This seat for me in Congress will not be the time to go be a Washington insider. This is going to be a time for me to become immersed in my district, telling my story, learning other people's stories, and then taking those back with me to DC to do my work. That's what needs to happen to rebuild trust. So even as party brands go as they are, you can at least trust your own representative and know that your government isn't failing you. You can have faith that at least in your person. And if that happens in more places, I feel like people will have more faith and trust in their government.
What a concept. Y'all, Shannon is not new to this. She is true to this. Okay. She is an independent minded leader. No, I love that. So switching gears a bit, we've talked a lot about the left. Let's talk about some Republicans. You obviously, like you said, this is a purple district. You've got plenty of Republicans. You have plenty of people who voted for Trump 2 years ago, 2 years ago, and they may vote for you. And they have voted for you. They probably have split their ticket to vote for you in your House district. So can you talk a little bit more about the Trump Bird voters and the independent voters who you believe that you can earn trust with and continue to lead as a leader in your state?
So it also really helps that I have Republicans in my family, and that has made me fearless. I will go anywhere into any group. And I've been so excited to go already into the deepest, reddest parts of my district. These are places that have been traditionally represented by Republicans. And what's interesting about that is that a lot of Republican elected officials have taken these voters for granted because they know they represent deep red areas. So they're not showing up and asking people, hey, what is it that you care about?
Yeah.
I'm so-and-so. I want to be your next representative. Tell me what you hope I'll be working on. They aren't getting that. And so the visits I have made into the deepest, reddest parts of the state, of course, don't get me wrong, there are still some people who I will never crack, and that's okay. Maybe not today, but you give me some time and I'll get them too.
Yes.
I'm determined. But by and large, people want to be heard, and they want someone to listen to them. And then I think all I need to do is close the deal and go actually fight for them. And that's how you win people over. I know that in my previous elections, I have knocked on Trump voting households. I didn't know it at the time. But when I am willing, first of all, to not be put off by the fact that they voted for Trump, and I think a lot of those doors, when you knock those doors, they say, oh, I voted for Trump, as if I'm going to just say, oh, well, then we have nothing to talk about. Of course, that's not my response. I say, oh, well, tell me why that is. What do you care about? And proceed to listen to them and hear what they have to say. And you know what? I got those people's votes.
Heck yeah.
Yes. And so I don't believe is particularly in my district. I can't speak for anybody else's district. But here, again, if you're authentic and you listen to people, there's such an opportunity to build trust. There's just nothing more powerful than showing up and being a real person and not an ideologue. Of course, there are going to be those voters who want the ideologue. But by and large, to build a winning coalition, someone who can win this seat, not just in 2026, but hold it in 2028, it's going to be that person who shows up, who listens, and then who lives up to the promises that are made.
I appreciate that so much. And yeah, I was going to ask another question, but I think we covered it. I think we covered it, Shannon. I think you've been beautiful. I feel like I want you to be in politics for a long time because you're so great. But then I also at the same time, like, well, I actually like her. And I know that's it's kind of a crappy career sometimes. So like on one hand, I'm like, I want you to serve forever. But on the other hand, I'm like, no, I actually like her. I want her to have a good life. So anyway, Shannon, you're absolutely wonderful, like genuinely remarkable, generational talent. So thank you for being you. Thank you for the love and the service and the compassion that you bring your work and the courage that you bring your work because you are truly one of a kind. And we need more leaders like you. So guys, Shannon is on our Win the Middle slate. So go to Act Blue and give Shannon money. She has a primary she needs to get through. She also has obviously the general election coming this November. So please send her some dollars, send her some love, like her on all the social media platforms so she can get some impressions online. And make sure that you just give her the support that she needs to continue to know that she has people who have her back. Shannon, you are absolutely wonderful. No notes. You're awesome. So thank you so much for being you and looking forward to chatting with you next time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great to talk to you.